During a family vacation, my mother snatched my purse and said, "We'll be using your credit card for this trip." I smiled and said, "Then you'll love this message from the bank." She started screaming when she read. During a family vacation, my mother suddenly snatched my purse and declared, "We're using your credit card for this trip." I just smiled and said, "Then you're going to love this message from the bank." The moment she read it, she began screaming. That was the instant I knew the trip was about to go sideways. There she stood in the middle of the airport terminal, clutching my purse like she just won the lottery, wearing that smug look she always had when she thought she was getting her way. "We're using your credit card for this trip," she repeated, grinning as if she pulled off the heist of the century. I smiled so broadly it must have unsettled her. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward her. "Now you're going to love this message from the bank." Her face instantly drained of color, her eyes darting over the screen before she started screaming. Let me back up a little. I was raised to always say no, but every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse. Yet I knew if I did, I'd be painted as the selfish daughter who didn't care about her family, especially with all the guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and endless phone calls. So I agreed, but only on one condition. I would book my own flight and hotel room. No shared accommodations. No way for them to have access to my money. I was going, but I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me. My mother hated that. She pouted and whined, but eventually she let it go. Or so I thought. Fast forward to the airport. We just landed, and I was already exhausted. I spent the entire flight mentally bracing for whatever nonsense my mother was about to pull. Sure enough, as soon as we reached baggage claim, she made her move. She snatched my purse right from my hands and repeated in that smug tone, "We're using your credit card for this trip." I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. I turned the screen to face her. Her eyes scanned the message, then she read it again, and then she screamed. I knew this was coming. Over the years, I learned that my mother was relentless. She'd pull stunts like this at every opportunity, and I had spent a long time making sure she'd never get another dime from me. A week before the trip, I called my bank to explain the financial abuse and manipulation I'd been dealing with. The bank rep was sympathetic and, more importantly, helpful. Together, we set up very specific security measures. My card was locked to my current location. Any charge made outside my immediate area would be flagged and declined unless I approved it through the app. For extra protection, I set my daily spending limit to exactly $1. My mother glared at my phone, her fingers gripping my purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What did you do?" she hissed. I just shrugged and said, "Bank security." They thought it was weird that all these big charges were coming from a place I hadn't been yet. Her face twisted with fury. "Fix it right now," she demanded. True to form, she wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. She was already plotting her next move. I checked into my hotel with a feeling of pride. I deliberately booked a room on a different floor from my parents'. I needed space, a buffer. But the next morning, the real nightmare began. I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. Banging, not knocking, as if someone were trying to break it down. Groaning, I rolled out of bed and peered through the chain-locked door. It was my furious mother. I barely had time to brace myself before she started screaming through the crack. "Open this door right now. We need to talk." I hesitated, debating if I should just ignore her and avoid the scene. But I knew her. If I did nothing, she'd just escalate. So I cracked the door open about an inch, keeping the chain locked. She shoved a crumpled piece of paper through the gap. "The front desk says our card was declined. We can't check into our room. Fix it." I stared at her. "You didn't prepay," I pointed out softly. "Why would we prepay? We were planning to use your card," she scoffed. I almost burst out laughing, so absurd it hurt. But I held it in and handed the paper back. "Sounds like a problem." She slammed her fist against the door frame. "You think this is funny? Where are we supposed to sleep?" I shrugged. "Maybe you should have brought your own money." That sent her into a tirade, screaming threats, accusing me of abandoning our family, humiliating her, ruining the trip, until I remembered. She was just as guilty. She'd never once stood up for me or told her she was out of line. I shook my head and closed the door in her face. But she wasn't done. An hour later, my phone exploded with calls, texts, and voicemails. I ignored them all. Then there was a polite knock on my door. I checked through the peephole. This time it wasn't my mother or father, but hotel security. I sighed, knowing exactly where this was heading. I opened the door. "What's the issue?" the security guy asked with a tight smile. "Your parents are at the front desk saying you stole their money and left them stranded." I laughed. A genuine hearty laugh. "You're kidding, right?" He didn't laugh back. "They're insisting you let them stay in your room." I crossed my arms. "Oh hell no. Do they have any proof that I stole anything?" He hesitated. "Well no, but..." I cut him off. "They're lying. I booked my own room. I paid for it with my own money. They tried to steal from me, and now they're facing the consequences. That's not my problem." The security guard looked a little uncomfortable. "I'm not taking sides, but they claim they have nowhere else to go. The hotel is fully booked." I raised an eyebrow. Not my problem. Behind him, another voice agreed. I leaned past security and saw the hotel manager, a sharp-eyed middle-aged woman with the exhausted look of someone who dealt with too many entitled guests. She turned to me. I checked the system, she said. You paid in full. Your parents, however, did not. If they can't provide another payment method, they'll have to leave. Before I knew it, I heard my mother's shrill voice echo down the hall. And just like that, they were gone. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, I went to the resort bar to grab a drink and relax, until my phone buzzed again. A notification. An attempted login from an unrecognized device. I sat up straight, my stomach dropping, then another notification. Password reset requested. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what was happening. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door and pulled up my banking app. Sure enough, someone had tried to reset my password. I immediately changed everything, new password, two-factor authentication, maxed out security alerts. Then I did something I should have done long ago. I called my bank and placed a fraud alert on my account. I sent my mother a text. Nice try. Hope you enjoyed the rest of your trip. No response. The next morning I got a call from my dad. She's saying you locked her out of the bank. I smiled. No, I locked myself out. She was trying to break in. After a moment of silence, he sighed. You know how she gets, right? I said, yeah, and I'm done with it. That was my final move. I wasn't going to keep playing defense. I'd spent my whole life letting my mother lie, manipulate, and steal. All under the excuse that family takes care of each other. But trying to break into my bank account crossed the line. I pulled out my laptop, logged into my accounts, and froze my credit. No new accounts, no loans, no credit cards could be opened in my name without a mountain of security. Then I reviewed my bank transactions and found something disturbing. A series of small withdrawals over the past 6 months. $20 here, $50 there. Always spaced out, so I hadn't noticed until now. I felt sick. She must have found a way to access my account before this trip. Maybe she got my card details or convinced a bank teller she was acting on my behalf. I was done. I called my bank, reported the fraud, and requested a full audit of every account in my name. They reissued my card, changed my security questions, and blocked every device that had ever accessed my account. Even mine. It was nuclear-level security. Then I texted my mother. Hey mom, just letting you know I found all the money you took. The bank is investigating now. Expect a call soon. Her reply came instantly. How dare you, we're family. I didn't steal anything. You're being crazy. I ignored it. I called my dad next. Dad, did you know mom was taking money from me? There was silence, then a long sigh. She told me you were helping us out. I closed my eyes. I know nothing more. Then he said, you'd be fine with it. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, the bank isn't fine with it. His voice changed. Wait, what did you do? I said, I reported it as fraud. The bank is investigating. His breath hitched. You can't do that, he stammered. By then, my mother's voice was filled with outrage. She was fuming that I had reported her actions. My dad, ever conflicted, simply said, you can't do that, Alice. But I replied, I did. I'm done being your ATM. In that moment, after years of emotional and financial abuse, I finally took control. My mother's schemes, my father's disapproving sighs, and even my own lingering guilt were left behind. I reclaimed my power by freezing my credit and reporting every fraudulent withdrawal. That day, as I sat back and looked at my bank statements on my laptop, I realized I had changed everything. My mother could no longer manipulate me, and I wouldn't be exploited for someone else's benefit ever again. My life was mine to rebuild. No longer defined by guilt, no longer shackled by family expectations. And as I closed my laptop, I felt a bittersweet relief. I was freed. At that I gritted my teeth. Watch me. Then the biggest twist. Yet an hour later my sibling called me. They were younger than me by a few years, the golden child, the one my mother had always put on a pedestal. They never got treated like I did, so when I saw their name pop up I hesitated. Then I answered what they hesitated to. Then in a shaky voice they said she did it to me too. I sat up. What? I just checked my account. They whispered she took money from me, a lot, hundreds, maybe more. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about me. She had been stealing from both of us, and that's when it hit me. She hadn't just planned to use my credit card for the trip. She had already drained whatever money they had brought. That's why she had no backup plan. That's why they had no way to pay for their room. She had burned through everything. And now she was screwed, because if she thought I was a problem, she had no idea what was coming. My sibling wasn't like me. I had spent years trying to keep the peace, trying to handle my mother, but them, they didn't take betrayal well, and they were angry, really, really angry. And that's when the real revenge started, because my sibling, they weren't about to let this go quietly, and neither was I. After my sibling found out that our mother had stolen from them too, something in them snapped. They weren't like me. I had spent years trying to distance myself from our mother's control, carefully cutting ties without setting off a full-scale war, but my sibling, they had never been betrayed like this before, and when they realized she had used them, that she had drained their money just like she had tried to drain mine, they lost it. And I was right there with them. Leighton, end this. They said. I agreed. Step 1, let her dig her own grave. We didn't say anything right away. We let my mother think she had gotten away with it. She was still fuming over with the fact that I had locked her out of my accounts, but she had no idea that my sibling had found out about the stolen Money. We kept our distance, ignored her calls, and let her panic, and sure enough by the next day she was desperate. She sent text after text. I don't deserve this treatment. I am your mother. You owe me respect. This is your fault for abandoning us. We have no money because of you. Classic manipulation. Then the big one. I called the bank and told them you made a mistake. They're going to unfreeze everything. I laughed out loud because what she didn't know was that the bank had already flagged her name. I had spoken to the fraud department personally. They knew she was lying, but that wasn't even the best part. Step 2, hit her where it hurts. While my mother was busy blowing up my phone, my sibling was working on something else, pulling up her entire financial history. And what they found, it was worse than we thought. Our mother wasn't just bad with money, she was in serious debt. Credit cards, maxed out late fees, personal loans. She was drowning, and she had been using our money to keep her head above water. She wasn't stealing just to take a vacation, she was stealing to survive. And she had no idea that we had found out, so we made a plan. Step 3, the trap. My sibling called her. I listened in on speaker. Mom, they said, their voice shaking just enough to sound real. I don't know what to do. I just checked my account and there's money missing, a lot of it. My mother did not miss a beat. Oh honey, she sighed, fake sympathy dripping from her voice. That's terrible. Are you sure you didn't spend it on accident? My sibling played along. No, I didn't. I think someone stole from me. Oh sweetie, don't worry, she said, I'll help you figure it out. I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing. She was still lying. She was still pretending. Ending. She really thought she could talk her way out of this. That's when my sibling dropped the bomb. Well, the bank is already investigating. They said they're tracking where the money went, so I guess we'll know soon. Silence. Long, painful silence. Then my mother's voice changed, hard, cold. Panic. You didn't have to do that. Why not? My sibling asked, voice completely innocent. If it's just a cockey, they'll fix it, right? More silence. Then you ungrateful little brat. Bingo. Step for the public meltdown. We were done playing nice. My sibling went straight to the hotel manager. They explained everything, the stolen money, the fraud, the lies. They even showed proof that our mother had admitted to it in texts, and the manager, she was furious, nodded at us at my mother. Turns out my mother had been causing problems all week, complaining, harassing the staff, demanding free perks because she was a loyal guest. The manager was more than happy to deal with her, so she called security, and we got front row seats to the show. They found my mother at the pool sipping a drink she definitely couldn't afford, and when security asked her to leave, she lost her damn mind, screaming, crying, throwing things. She called the staff names, demanded to see the hotel owner, even tried to fake a medical emergency to get sympathy, but it didn't work because then the manager said the magic words, ma'am, the police have been called, and just like that she went dead silent. She tried to run, literally run, but security stopped her and my sibling. They looked her in the eye and said, you did this to yourself. Step 5, the final blow. My mother was escorted off the property, banned from the hotel, humiliated in front of dozens of guests, and then she had to figure out how to get home because my dad, he was done after everything. After seeing her try to destroy both of her kids, he finally snapped. He booked himself a separate flight home and left her stranded. She had no credit card, no money, no way to book a flight, and we enjoyed the rest of our vacation without her. The aftermath. When I got home, I followed through with the bank investigation. They confirmed it. She had stolen thousands from me and my sibling over the years. We pressed charges, and guess what? She got hit with fraud charges. The court forced her to pay back every penny, and when she couldn't, they froze her accounts. She lost everything. She called me crying, begging for help. I blocked her number. The sweetest revenge. Now years later, my sibling and I are thriving. We have real financial security. We take vacations, ones we actually pay for, and my mother, she's still drowning in debt, still crying to anyone who will listen, still blaming everyone but herself. But we were free, and that is the best revenge of all.